Hi, it's Maurice in here. Welcome back to the Peptide Paradox specialized audio series under the metabolic calibration framework. If you tuned in my last bonus briefing, you saw how I completely scoped legacy media, breaking down the exactly mechanisms of a synthetic induced sarcopenia, a full 24 hours before global financial papers began panicking over modern frailty epidemics. But today, I am leaving the mainstream conversation entirely behind. I want to talk directly to the high-performance athletes, the advanced biohackers, and the clinicians who are currently riding the crest of the peptide hype wave. Many of you listening are highly educated. You look at the clinical trials, you understand the baseline pharmacokinetics, and you think you are playing a calculated game. You assume that if you utilize a growth hormone secretagogue like CGC1295 or a GLP-1 agonist for an aggressive cutting phase, any muscle tissue or metabolic baseline you lose can simply be rebuilt later through sheer willpower and a standard hypertrophy. You believe the damage is temporary. You're wrong. Today we are diving deep into the molecular data that isn't featured in commercial brochures. We are exposing two massive scientific blind spots: the permanent alteration of human myonuclear domain and the systemic neurochemical burnout of a chronic receptor saturation. If you want to unvarnish that data-driven truth about what happens to human architecture under synthetic intervention, let's begin. Let's start with a foundational piece of exercise physiology that every elite athlete and clinician relies on: muscle memories. Under normal non-chemical training conditions, when you subject exskeletal muscles to progressive mechanical overload, your muscle fibers don't just grow larger. Your local satellite cells actively fuse with the existing muscle fibers, donating their nuclei to the tissue. This expansion of the myonuclear domain is a permanent structural upgrade. Even if you stop training for months and your muscle cells shrink, those newly acquired nuclei remain inside the architecture. The moment you return to training, your body skips the infrastructure phase and rapidly rebuilds size. This is your biological history locked in stone. But what happens when you introduce synthetic GLP-1 receptor agonists to force a rapid unnatural caloric deficit? When weight loss is accelerated through chemical appetite suppression, the body enters an acute high-stress catabolic state. New molecular tracking indicates that this rapid synthetic-driven muscles wasting doesn't just cause simple muscle atrophy, it triggers a process called the myonuclear apoptosis, because the metabolic shock is so severe and the nutrient signaling pathways are chemically disrupted that the muscle fibers actually begin discarding their underlying cellular nuclei. You aren't just letting a muscle cell get smaller, you are actively erasing its architectural memory. You are liquidating the very infrastructure that took you years of intense training to build. And when an athlete steps off a synthetic peptide cycle and attempts to rebuild their physique, they find that their previous baseline is completely unresponsive. The epigenetic slate has been wiped clean. You have downregulated your absolute ceiling of muscular adaptation. Now, let's pivot to the high-performance athletic circles who think they are bypassing the GLP-1 trap by running growth hormone secretagogues. Specifically, combinations like CGC1295, ipamorelin, and 677 to accelerate the fat oxidation and tissue repair. The logic seems elegant on paper. Force the pituitary gland to secrete a massive pulse of endogenous human growth hormone, downstream elevating insulin like growth factor IGF-1. But here's the data you ignored. The secretagogues achieve this pulse by binding directly to the growth hormone secretagogue receptor, or GHSR1. In nature, this receptor is triggered by your native hunger hormone ghrelin. What the biohacking community completely overlooks is that GHSR1A receptors is not just located in your pituitary gland. It is heavily concentrated within the ventral tegmental area of your brain, the literal epicenter of the human dopaminergic reward system. When you continuously flood your system with research-grade, long-acting synthetic secretagogues, you aren't just pulsing growth hormone, you're causing a profound chronic desensitization of your central dopamine pathways. The clinical result: a state of deep neurochemical flattening. High-performance athletes suddenly find themselves suffering from anhedonia and complete loss of training drive, disrupted sleep architectures, and chronic systemic anxiety. And the systemic feedback loop: by oversaturating the ghrelin dopamine axis, you alter your body's native reward feedback loops. The moment you cease administration, your brain experiences severe metabolic resistance. Your native growth hormone production drops below pre-cycle levels. Your dopamine baseline crashes, and your biological drive is entirely compromised. You optimized for a minor increase in IGF-1, but you bankrupt your central nervous system to get it. And if you're listening onto here to these and realize you've been riding the hype wave without looking at the underlying cellular ledger, don't panic. The beauty of the human biology is the capacity for radical adaptation, provided you stop forcing compliance through synthetic saturation and start delivering the correct biological parameters. To reverse myonuclear degradation and repair neurochemical receptor sensitivity, we must execute a complete metabolic calibration. And let's start by restoring myocellular sensitivity through true mechanical tension. You cannot cruise through your workouts if you are recovering from synthetic muscle wasting. You must introduce high-threshold motor unity recruitment. That means lifting at heavy, near-maximal loads, specifically focusing on eccentric phase of movement to force cellular mechanotransduction pathways to signal the creation of fresh myonuclei. And 2, upregulate native GHSR1 sensitivity via fasting windows. To repair the dopaminergic burnout caused by the secretagogues, you must allow your ghrelin receptors to clear. Implementing strategic fasting windows allows native pulsatile ghrelin to naturally bind and upregulate its own receptors, restoring both your intrinsic dopamine drive and your native growth hormone pulsatility. And 3, execute kinetic nutrient pacing. As laid out in detail inside my issue number 5 of my newsletter, you must utilize short-chain fat acids fermentation to naturally signal your L cells to release native GLP-1 by sequencing soluble fibers and premium proteins at the absolute front of your feeding windows. You achieve elite satiety metrics and insulin sensitivity without desensitizing your central architecture. If you've been listening Auntie here, I want to tell you that true physical sovereignty belongs to those who understand the microdata, not to those who follow commercial trends. If you are a clinician looking to safeguard your clients or an athlete looking to protect your lifetime of hard work, you need to be operating at this level of scientific clarity every single week. This entire protocol, alongside the comprehensive data sheets, peer-reviewed clinical citations, and exactly nutrient pacing blueprints, has just dropped in my number 5 issue of the metabolic calibration on my Beehive newsletter. And if you aren't subscribed yet, you are operating with an information deficit. Head over to the link in the show notes and lock your subscriptions to get these briefs directly to your inbox every single week. For my active community operating on X, we are taking this specific conversation live. And join me for our upcoming weekly Space on X, where we will be doing an open floor Q&A, breaking down real-time performance questions with top medical minds and elite athletes in our circle, and everyone will be over there. If this episode challenged the way you view performance optimization, do me a massive favor. Hit the follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Leave a detailed review under both podcasts and the newsletters. Your feedback is the direct fuel that drives the signal through the digital noise. Calibrate your inputs. Protect the architecture. I will see you in the next calibration.